Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm going to be doing a Psy-Frame deck profile. So I figured with Security 4 is coming right around the corner, I figured this would be a perfect time to actually update this deck. And it's been a while since I actually updated my Psy-Frame deck, and this deck is really insane. And if you like hand traps, this is basically the deck for you, because this is handtraps.deck, which is really amazing. I really like playing around with this deck, and it has one of the most powerful hand traps in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever created in the deck as one of the main monsters, which is Psy-Framegear Gamma, which is an insanely good card in the deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell near so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below where we have all sorts of awesome rewards for you guys, like getting your name scripts for every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Psy-Frame Driver. So Psy-Frame Driver has basically no abilities, but is the main card of the entire deck, because you're going to try and special summon this card to your side of the field as quickly as possible with your Psy-Frame gears. So the Psy-Frame gears are basically monsters that you're going to be using along with this card, because you're going to use their effects to negate something, and then you're going to special summon out them from your hand, and then special summon out Driver as well. So you have to play Driver in the deck. But he is a 2500 attack point monster, which is pretty good. And I've won quite a few games actually from normal summoning this card, which was weird. We then play a single copy of Psy-Frame Multi-Threader. Multi-Threader is a good one-of in the deck, because this card's name becomes Psy-Frame Driver while it's in your hand or graveyard. And also, if a Psy-Frame card you control would be destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can discard this card instead. And if Psy-Frame Tuner is special summoned to your field while this card's in your graveyard, then you can special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to get you additional cards on your side of the field to go ahead and link summon or to go into a synchro monster, which this deck is very good at synchro summoning. We did play 3 copies of Psy-Framegear Gamma, which all of your Psy-Frame monsters cannot be normal summoned or set that are gears. They cannot be normal summoned or set, and they must be special summoned by a card effect, and then they have a different effect that negates something. So for example, if you guys have never run into Gamma, I don't know what you're doing, but Gamma basically has the ability that when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control no monsters, quick effect, and then this is where they all share the same effect, that you can special summon both this card and one Psy-Frame Driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard, and if you do, negate the activation. If you do that, destroy that monster. And during the end phase, banish this face-up monster, special summon, or banish the special summon monsters that were special summoned by this effect, which is pretty good just to be able to just banish them so you can use another hand trap. We then play 3 copies of Psy-Framegear Delta. Delta has a really neat effect because it has the ability that during either player's turn, when an opponent activates a spell card while you control no monsters, you can special summon this card and a Driver to be able to negate that card, which is a really good effect. And also it's a tuner monster, which is going to help you go into your Psy-Frame Lord Omega. We then played 3 copies of Beta. Beta is pretty good too because it has the ability that when an opponent's monster declares an attack while you control no monsters, you can special summon both this card from your hand and a Psy-Frame Driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard, which is a really good effect just to be able to get you an additional monster on your side of the field and negate an attack. We then play 3 copies of Alpha. Alpha is really good too. Alpha is just really insane because it has the ability that when your opponent normal or special summons a monster while you control no monsters, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand and one Psy-Framegear Driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard, which is pretty good just to be able to just negate something like a Solemn Judgment almost, but it's a speed spell too. But it's still a really good card just to have in the deck. We then play a single copy of Epsilon. Epsilon is pretty neat too. It's probably the worst of them all because it has the ability that during either player's turn when your opponent activates a trap card, well, you control no monster, you can special summon this card and that card to be able to negate the activation if you destroy it. It's good to be able to negate stuff like a copy of Impermanence or Evenly Match, but I just play this card as a one-of. We then play 2 copies of Cyverse Gadget. Cyverse Gadget is when this card is normal summon, you can target a level 2 or lower monster in your graveyard and special summon it, which is any of your copies of your Psy-Frame gears can be special summoned to your side of the field off this effect. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, then you can special summon 1 gadget token to your side of the field that's level 2. But basically, you're going to use this to link summon into your copy of Lambda. Lambda is really good in the deck too to go into this deck. It's really important that you can go into that card. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Monster Reborn because Monster Reborn helps us link summon into our copy of Lambda extremely easily by summoning back a monster from our opponent's graveyard or summoning a card back from our graveyard. It's just really good to go in for the copy of Monster Reborn to go in for additional plays. One copy of Upstart Goblin because Upstart Goblin helps the deck be a 39 card deck and dig into the deck a little deeper. One copy of Call by the Grave. Call by the Grave is really good because you can target one monster your opponent controls and banish it, which is pretty good just to stop hand traps. One copy of Psychic Path. Psychic Path is kind of neat because you pay 800 life points to select 2 of your remove from play psychic monsters and add them back to your hands. This card's really good in this deck, but you just really need it as a one-of. It's kind of like salvage for this deck. You play a single copy of Terraforming to get to the field spell because the field spell is ridiculously important to get to in this deck. Psy-Frame Circuit is like one of the best cards in the entire archetype outside of Gamma. We then play 2 copies of Demise of the Land. Demise of the Land lets you activate one, if your opponent special summons a monster, you can activate one field spell directly from your deck, which is really good. Basically, it's like playing 3 Terraformings in this deck. So this card's very, very, very important for the deck. We then play 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. Foolish Burial Goods just sends the exact card that we need from our deck to the graveyard that's a spell or trap, which is very important because one of the traps actually benefits off of being sent to the graveyard. You play 2 copies of Psychic Feel Zone. Psychic Feel Zone is kind of neat because it lets you target, you get to select 2 of your remove from play monsters, 1 Psychic type monster and 1 Psychic type non-tuner. So you target a Psychic type tuner and a non-tuner, and then return them to the graveyard. And if you special summon 1 Psychic type synchro monster from your extra deck in face of defense position whose level is equal to the total monsters of the return monsters, which can be cards that equal 8 or 7 because you play psychic monsters in the extra deck that are level 7 and level 8 to be able to synchro into. So this card's really good to help out. We then play 3 copies of Psy-Frame Circuit. Now, Psy-Frame Circuit is the most important card in the entire deck because if a Psy-Frame monster is special summoned to your side of the field, except during the damage step, you can immediately, if this card resolves, you get to synchro summon a synchro monster using only the Psy-Frame monsters you control. And at the start of the damage step, if a Psy-Frame monsters you control battles an opponent's monster and discard a Psy-Frame monster, your battling monster gains the attack of the discarded monster until the end phase of the turn, which is pretty good just to be able to discard any of your Psy-Frame cards from your deck to your hand, to be able to make them gain attack points, because you can discard something like a copy of Psy-Frame Driver to make it gain 2,500, but if you're discarding any of the gears only go up to 1,500, so you can gain up to 15 to 2,500 off this effect, which is pretty good if your Psy-Frame is battling. So this card is hands down the best card in the entire deck that you have to get to as soon as possible. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing a single copy of Metaverse because Metaverse just gets out your field spell, which I mentioned earlier is extremely important to get to. You play 3 copies of Drowning Mirror Force. Drowning Mirror Force is ridiculously good in this deck too because if you don't control a monster, this deck thrives off of not controlling a monster. And so if you activate this, then you're going to bounce your entire opponent's entire field back into their hand or back into their deck, which is extremely good. They usually cannot recover after you've activated a Drowning Mirror Force against them, which is why I'm playing this card as a one-of. It's ridiculously good in the deck because you have to have no monsters on your side of the field to resolve the effect of your Psy-Framegear monsters. So having this card in the deck, when you can't activate one of your Psy-Framegears and your opponent just goes in for an attack, you can resolve this and be able to stop your opponent. And along with, I think it was Beta, that negates all the other cards or negates an attack and you can special summon it in a driver, this card's really good. And if you synchro summon in like a copy of Omega and Omega banishes itself, then you have the ability to just activate this anyway, so it can lure your opponent into a false sense of security with your copy of Driver coming back, that your opponent, or not Driver, but Omega coming back, that your opponent's going to think, oh, I can go in, but you have Drowning Mirror Force. We then play 3 copies of Psy-Frame Overload. Psy-Frame Overload is a card that you're usually going to use with your copy of Foolish Burial Goods to send to the graveyard because it has the ability that once per turn, you can manage a Psy-Frame monster from your hand or face it from your side of the field to target a card to your opponent's field and banish it face down, which is a really good effect just to be able to banish something. And then it also has the ability to be able to, during either player's turn, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to be able to add 1 Psy-Frame card from your deck to your hand, which is a really good effect, just to be able to add one of your Psy-Frame cards from your deck to your hand, to be able to send this card to the graveyard during your opponent's turn, grab whatever they're playing against. This card helps you read what your opponent's playing against, because say, for example, if I used my copy of Foolish Burial Goods, send this card to the graveyard, and then once you send this to the graveyard during your opponent's turn, they activate, say, a spell card, and you realize what they're playing, you can then use this to be able to grab the exact hand trap you need to be able to stop your opponent, or Psy-Framegear to be able to stop your opponent. So that's it for the main deck, guys, let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're playing a single copy of Omega because Omega is limited. And this card basically rips cards out of your opponent's hand, which is really, really good. 2 copies of Zeta. Zeta is pretty good too because it has the ability that once per turn during either player's turn, you can target a special summon monster your opponent controls in face of attack position. Banish both that monster and this card, but return them during the next standby phase. And if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one other Psy-Frame card in your graveyard and return this card to the extra deck, and you add that card to your hand, which is a really good effect just to be able to, again, kind of with storing or with Drowning Mirror Force, to kind of lure your opponent into a false sense of security, to be able to flip this and then be able to summon this off your field spell and then drop your copy of Drowning Mirror Force to shuffle everything back, because this card's going to let them have one of their cards back. We then play a single copy of Satellite Warrior. Now, this is a really weird card, but you can go into it, and it's really big and pops multiple cards. Like, you go into this card, and it's the end game. You're going to summon this card very infrequently, but it's really good, because if this card is Synchro Summon, you get to target cards your opponent controls up to the number of Synchro materials used, or Synchro monsters in the graveyard, and then you pop those cards on the field, and also it gains 1,000 attack points for every card that it popped, which is pretty good as well. Play a single copy of the Virtual World QB. QB is really good in the deck too. It's pretty easy to go into if you have a Psy-Frame monster on your side of the field, like one of the level 1s and a level 8 on your side of the field. This card's really easy to go into and it banishes everything, so it's pretty good in the deck. Play a single copy of Thought Ruler Archfiend. Thought Ruler Archfiend is really good because when this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you gain life points equal to the original attack of the monster, and you can pay 1,000 life points to negate the activation of a spell or trap card that targets a psychic monster and destroy it. So it's a really good card just to be able to stop your opponent from doing stuff and to gain you some life points back. Draco Berserker, because it can also, basically, when an opponent's monster activates its effect, you can banish that monster. It doesn't target, so it's a really good card just to be able to go into. Borreload Savage, really easy to go into as well, and has the negation effects. Dawn Dragster, because it can negate spells and traps. Black Rose, because it can board wipe, which is really good. Link Rebo, because it can negate attacks, which is really good. 2 copies of Lambda. Lambda is ridiculously good in this deck because it's like the card that you want to go into in this deck as fast as possible, because it has the ability that you can activate the effect of this card once per turn, and it has the ability that if a face-up psychic monster you control is banished face-up while you control that monster, then you can activate the effect that during the end phase you get to add a Psy-Frame card from your deck to your hand. And you only see the effect of this card once per turn. But the really good effect about this card is you can activate the effect of Psy-Frame monsters in your hand even while you control a monster, which is an insane effect just to be able to turn the deck's entire restriction off with Lambda. Lambda is single-handedly the most important card in the entire deck to be able to go into, because you're going to be able to just go into this card and be able to do anything you need for the entire rest of the game. And then you play a single copy of Link Disciple and Link Devotee, because these cards are really helpful in the deck to be able to go into with your copy of your Cyverse gadget. So that's it for the deck, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Definitely tell what you think of this deck down in the comments down below. A lot of you have actually been requesting for me to do an update of this, and I figured what better time with Security Force, which is part of the lore of the copies of your Psy-Frames. I figured what better time to actually do an upgraded version of this deck than now. And this deck is really fun to play around with if you like to frustrate your opponent, which is a really, really cool concept. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.